Weird. I just fired up my camcorder and got this really strange error message, and the zoom went all wonky. It was all zoomed right in, and no matter what I did, it was unable to focus, and I got like errors 61 flashing on the screen. I'm like, what the hell's going on there? Anyway, welcome. Long-awaited DVD review episode, edition, whatever. But not issue, because it's not a comic book or a magazine. This is one I've been wanting to do for a while, but I needed to find some video covers so I could sort of give you a look as I'm talking about different stuff. What am I talking about? Well, a series that for me is very special and very influential, and for many others is very controversial. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But I am, of course, talking about none other than one of my all-time favorite anime series, Robotech. Dun, dun, dun. And in this edition of the Multimedia Chronicles, well, I think Robotech holds the record for being the single most re-released on video in all the major formats ever of any anime series. Yeah, there's been a lot of releases of Robotech over the years. And in this edition of the Multimedia Chronicles, we're going to take a look at all of them. This is the Robotech DVD disambiguation video. But before we begin, we're going to get into a little bit of back history of the show and of the various video releases that have come out over the years. Today, on the Multimedia Chronicles. Alright, just going to move back a little bit so that there's room for me and the covers, which will be going here, right where my hand is. Okay, so Robotech. I'm going to try to do this quickly because I don't want this to be another epic length thing like the Voltron one was. I know everybody loved the Voltron one, but you tally up the running time of all three parts, it's like an hour long. I'm sorry, but that's just a little too long for me. So I want to try to keep these more concise and to the point and have less rambling in them like what I'm doing right now. Okay, so Robotech. Robotech originally premiered in syndication all over the US and Canada in 1985. It was an 85-episode anime-based science fiction epic. Now the thing was, and this is where a lot of anime fans have a bone of contention with it, Robotech was actually created using footage and the basic storylines of three completely separate anime series. Specifically, you had Super Dimensional Fortress Macross, you had Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross, and Genesis Climber Mospita, respectively. So when they went to put together Robotech, they wanted to, this was Harmony Gold Entertainment. Harmony Gold Entertainment wanted to bring some anime over to North America and show it on television. Problem was, as I mentioned in some of my previous videos, at the time, the minimum number of episodes that was advisable to have when syndicating a show was 65. So that you could have 5 episodes shown a week, Monday through Friday, in rotation throughout the 4 13-week blocks making up the 52-week year. So the problem was, the various shows that they were looking at, none of them were 65 episodes. For example, Macross, the longest of the three, was 36 episodes. Southern Cross was 24. Mospita was 25. Now originally they were just going to bring over Macross, but then they realized, no, there's not enough episodes to really properly syndicate it and get it out there to as many stations as possible. So they came up with an idea. Why not get 3 shows with similar design and similar kind of thematic elements and combine them into one massive saga. So enter Mr. Carl Macek, who some people hail as a genius and others say is the devil himself. I will leave it up to you to make your own judgment. What Carl Macek did was he looked at all 3 of these series that they were looking at. They were looking primarily at the Super Dimension series produced by Toei. I can't remember who made it. It's been a long time since I've read the back history, but I'm going from memory here. Anyway, they were originally just looking at Macross and the Super Dimensions series, which was a series of 3 or several unrelated, I think it was 3 unrelated shows that this anime company had produced. There was Super Dimension Fortress Macross, Super Dimension Cavalry, Southern Cross, and there was also another one called Super Dimension Century Orgus. Now, Macross and Southern Cross, even though Southern Cross didn't take place on Earth, it could easily be made to pass for Earth because it was very Earth-like. Orgus, on the other hand, which would have been the 3rd generation of Robotech, the 3rd part of Robotech, had characters that were humanoid but had ears like cat ears and tails. So even though they looked human, they had tails, and it was clearly not Earth that they were on, and they had like alien friends and stuff like that. So they couldn't make that one work within the context of what they had envisioned for the Robotech project. So they took a look at another one called Genesis Climber Mospeada. Genesis Climber Mospeada is the one with the Cyclone motorcycles. You know, the motorcycles that transform into their armor and stuff like that, and they're fighting these giant insectoid creatures. So anyway, to make the long story short, they took these 3 shows, rewrote them, rearranged them, re-edited them, and combined them into the epic saga that we know as Robotech. Now, a lot of anime purists take exception to this still to this day and hate Robotech because they see it as a bastardization of these anime classics. Even though both Southern Cross and Mospeada didn't do particularly well when they originally aired in Japan. So in this case, Robotech actually brought a lot more attention to them and got them, noticed far more than they would have been if they had just stayed as these 2 obscure shows. Macross, on the other hand, Macross was a huge hit and has spawned many, many sequels and some movies and spin-offs and alternate universe tales and all kinds of stuff. Lots of comics, lots of books, and lots of toys as well, especially in Japan. Macross is huge over there and still remains huge to this day. So anyway, they combined them all into this epic story. And when they combined them, they found they didn't only meet the 65 episode requirement, they actually exceeded it by 20 episodes. So Robotech is actually 85 episodes long, which is a pretty good length for, a self-contained science fiction epic saga. I'm already seeing by the running time, I'm going to have to split this up into multiple parts. So much for not rambling, eh? You never really believed me anyway, did you? But that's okay. Robotech is huge, and it deserves having, some in-depth info about it. So in the end, the 3 series were basically structured so that they would follow one generation of characters. So it's like you have Macross is the 1st generation. Southern Cross, retitled Robotech Masters, became the 2nd generation. So in terms of the Robotech storyline, it occurs about 20 years after the 1st generation. And then finally, Mospeada became the 3rd generation, also known as Robotech the New Generation. The first one was just called Robotech the Macross Saga. So you have the Macross Saga, Masters, and the New Generation, making up the entire 3-generation saga of Robotech. Then after Robotech aired, it was quite successful. There was comic books, there was toys that didn't do particularly well, but the show itself was a huge success and generated a lot of spin-off merchandise. There's comic books and novels. Interesting thing, actually, the comic books were adaptations of the episodes themselves. So there was an independent comic book company called Comico who was kind of looking for some projects to do to get off the ground and get noticed. And they got the license to do Robotech comic book adaptations. So they adapted all 85 episodes as comic books. I remember collecting them as they came out. It was crazy. They had this crazy schedule where it was like they would have a new Robotech comic coming out like every 2 weeks. And they had several teams working on them. So they had the 3 generations being published as separate titles simultaneously and running in parallel to each other. So in a very short span of time, like just a few years, I guess about 2.5 to 3 years, they had adapted the entire 85 episode run of Robotech. Like, that's huge. That's a huge amount of work. And the interesting thing is, despite the legendary status of Robotech, you can still find those comic book adaptations fairly cheap. Like, I found a lot of fills for my collection in the 50-cent bin fairly recently. Can't complain about that. So, that's basically Robotech in a nutshell. So after the success of Robotech, they were looking to do a sequel. Now, of course, they didn't have any more shows that they could butcher and turn into a sequel. So they actually approached the original animation company to see if they could do new animation for them to do a sequel series. And they had envisioned this sequel series as a 65-episode follow-up saga called Robotech II: The Sentinels. Now, they ended up producing about 4 episodes, 4 partially completed episodes, and then nothing after that. And then there's a lot of different stories about why it failed, but so we won't bother going into that now. You can research it on your own. They say that it's because suddenly the value of the US dollar versus the yen was so, like, collapsed or something like that. There was just like this huge financial thing. I don't know how true that is. I think there was other things going on. But anyway, that's the official story. So Robotech II: The Sentinels was never completed. However, it was put out on video in a movie-style compilation containing all of the footage that they did complete. So, in a nutshell, you have Robotech, the 85-episode original series, comprised of 3 unrelated anime series, re-edited and rearranged to create this new overarching storyline. Then you have Robotech II: The Sentinels, which was never completed. There was also a movie made called either Robotech the Movie or Robotech the Untold Story. Either title, it's the same movie. Now, in that case, they did much the same thing as they did with the show, where they took, in this case, they took footage from Southern Cross, what became the second generation, and from another anime series, which featured character and mecha designs by the same people who did the other 3, called Megazone 2-3. Now, Megazone 2-3 was not a TV series or like a video series or anything. It was a series of movies. So there was 3 movies, all of which are available on DVD now, by the way, if you want to check it out. So there's 3 movies. So they took footage from the first movie, combined it with footage of Southern Cross, and created this new Robotech story. It's never been released officially. It is available as, as a download or as a bootleg out there if you search around a bit. But honestly, I haven't watched the whole thing. It's like the one chapter of the Robotech saga that I have not sat all the way through, because I just found it painful to watch. So maybe actually that kind of, because I had seen the original Megazone 2-3 and was quite familiar with it, and for me it was just awkward seeing this movie kind of shoehorned into the Robotech universe. But, it's funny now that I think about it. I think I can understand the anime purists' attitude towards Robotech now, because, of course, especially if they were familiar with the original Japanese versions, seeing it changed in this way to create a new story would be painful, because especially if you're familiar with the original story, One thing I read a while back, I don't remember where exactly, was they kind of likened it to, well, imagine if the Japanese took footage of Star Trek and Star Wars and Babylon 5 and re-edited and remixed them all together to create this whole new story of epic proportions. And then you, as someone who's familiar with any one or all of those, goes to Japan or gets a hold of a copy of it and watches it, and it just doesn't make any sense to you. That's the same thing. Like, for example, on a lot of the Robotech DVD pages on Amazon, I kept seeing comments from people saying, why don't they include the original Japanese dialogue on these DVD releases? Well, it's very simple, because there is no Japanese equivalent of the Robotech story. There is the original Japanese shows that they were edited from, but much like Voltron, it's a completely different story, and the dialogue wouldn't fit and wouldn't work because they use footage from both. The timing is different, everything is different. There's footage that's been cut out or censored for television because, Japanese cartoons tend to be a little more violent than American ones, so they had to cut some stuff and censor some stuff to make it suitable for, American morning or afternoon television viewing for kids. Even though there is quite a lot of, it's the thing that really impressed me about Robotech, which is basically what I was about to say, but I'll say it in a different form, is its honesty in portraying the horrors of war. Now, yes, it's an epic science fiction saga. Now, it covers the, it takes place in the near future, and it's giant robots and aliens and stuff, but the basic theme is that of war, of conflict, of one side versus the other. I won't say good versus evil, because the other thing that makes it interesting is it's not quite clear. Each side has its own legitimate motivations for doing what they're doing and fighting what they're fighting for. And there aren't really any bad guys. It's just sort of, you're rooting for the humans because you're human, but the aliens have a valid point and a valid reason for being where they are. For the most part. I'm not saying there's no bad guys. Of course there is. There's corruption within both sides. But that's the thing that makes it interesting, is it's not just a simple good versus evil story. And as for the horrors of war, characters die. I mean, this was a cartoon in 1985, which was the era of Transformers and G.I. Joe and Thundercats, where characters die. Main characters that you have come to grown to love over the course of the series, tongue-tied today, actually die at times. So, that sends a very strong message to kids. I mean, first off, it teaches them about death at an early age, and that, yes, once you die, you don't come back. That's it. It also teaches them that, no, war is not glamorous and exciting and fun and cool. It's hell. Look at the effect that character's death has had on the other characters. It's a very deep and emotional series in many, many ways. Then you also have the relationships between the characters. Sometimes some episodes don't even have any fighting in them, or very minimal fighting between the aliens and the humans, because it's about the characters. It's a character-oriented story exploring, more of their relationships and problems that they have with each other and such. So it's very complex, heady stuff, while at the same time being immensely entertaining and exciting. But far more deep than any other cartoon on the air at the time. So despite the fact that many of the anime purists see it as something of a bastardization, you can't deny the fact it had a cultural impact at the time. I mean, there were universities and high schools that were showing episodes of Robotech as a realistic example of showing the horrors of war to children. A way to introduce these, harder life concepts to children in a way that they would not only find entertaining, but also be able to understand. That's pretty cool stuff. So, purism aside, Robotech had a positive effect, and you can't deny that. Plus, the other effect being, of course, it helped to introduce anime to whole new generations of kids. And now, I think one of the reasons anime is so popular now is because a lot of people watching it now grew up with anime watching Robotech and Voltron and Force 5 and Star Blazers and stuff like that. All heavily edited, censored, Americanized, bastardized versions of anime classics, but that served a vital function in that they introduced anime to North America. So that's basically it for the Robotech background story. Sorry if I jumped around a lot, but you know me, I tend to do that. I don't plan these out. I just basically go from memory and go off the top of my head and see where it goes from there. And then hope that I covered everything. And then if I find I didn't when I'm editing them, I put up subtitles to fill in the gaps. But I think I covered everything for the most part. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, or just look around the web. I mean, I know there's an extensive Wikipedia page about Robotech. There's Robotech.com, which is the official Robotech website, and there's lots of lifelong fans there that will be happy to talk about it with you. So next time, we're going to talk about what I wanted to talk about in the first place, the Robotech DVD collections. This is one of them. This is only one of them. There are several. And the point of the video is I want to disambiguate them. So basically, if you're someone looking to get into Robotech, or if you're a longtime Robotech fan who just wants to have the show on your shelf and you're not sure what edition to get, I hope that I can help to clear a bit of that up for you, because I'm something of an expert when it comes to the various versions of Robotech that have been on video, Laserdisc, and DVD. Oh yes, I said Laserdisc. It's been out on Laserdisc. But we'll get into that next time. So that's it for part 1 of the Robotech DVD disambiguation video, The History of Robotech. Until next time, thanks for watching, and sayonara.